The text message arrived just as the wheels of the city bus screeched against the wet asphalt, a cold reminder of the winter I had been trying so hard to outrun. It read, "Have a nice taxi back home, loser. Your flight has been cancelled, and so have you. Asterisk. My name is Maya, and at 26 years old, I was standing under a leaking bus shelter with 2 oversized suitcases, watching my own parents and older brother drive away toward the airport terminal in a heated SUV. They hadn't just cancelled my plane ticket to our family's annual reunion in Switzerland, they had uninvited me from their lives, leaving me stranded in the freezing rain with less than $40 in my checking account. I didn't cry. Instead, I stared at the screen until the glowing pixels blurred into the gray afternoon, a strange, quiet laughter bubbling up from my chest. For the first time in my life, the suffocating fog of trying to please them finally cleared. Growing up, I was always the shadow in our pristine, upper-middle-class household. My father, a high-profile corporate consultant, and my mother, a woman who measured human worth by social standing, viewed my brother, Julian, as their crowning achievement. Julian was polished, Ivy League educated, and cruel in that subtle, smiling way that leaves no bruises but breaks your spirit just the same. I, on the other hand, chose a path they deemed embarrassing. I became a pastry chef, working 16-hour shifts in a damp bakery, my hands constantly smelling of yeast and vanilla, my knuckles scarred from hot sheet pans. To my mother, my profession wasn't a career, it was a personal insult to her social circle. Our family dinners were never about catching up, they were carefully staged interrogations where my life choices were dissected and ridiculed over expensive china. I endured it because I thought that if I worked hard enough, if I became successful enough on my own terms, they would eventually see me. I had saved for 6 months to afford my share of this family trip, believing it was a chance for a fresh start. But as I stood there watching the taillights of their car vanish into the fog, holding a phone that contained their cruel final words, I realized some bonds aren't broken by accident, they are severed by design. The ride back to my tiny studio apartment in the city's industrial district cost me $32, nearly my last dime. The taxi smelled of stale air freshener and damp upholstery, a stark contrast to the leather-scented interior of my father's car. When I finally unlocked my door, the silence of my apartment wrapped around me like a heavy wool blanket. I dropped my bags by the door, sank onto the cold linoleum floor, and finally let the tears come. But they weren't tears of grief. They were tears of absolute, exhausting liberation. I set my phone on the kitchen counter, refusing to reply to their message. I knew exactly what they wanted, a frantic phone call, tears, a desperate plea for forgiveness for whatever imaginary slight had triggered their cruelty this time. My silence would be my first boundary. 2 days passed in a strange, quiet blur. I threw myself into my work at the bakery, kneading dough until my shoulders ached, finding solace in the predictable, honest chemistry of flour, water, and heat. Bakery work doesn't lie to you. If you give it time and care, it rises. On the 3rd morning, while pulling a tray of golden croissants from the oven, my phone vibrated in my pocket. It was an email invitation from a prominent luxury lifestyle magazine. Every year, during the Winter Gala, they hosted a highly publicized family legacy and entrepreneurship panel. My father's firm was the main sponsor, and Julian was scheduled to be the keynote speaker, presenting his new tech startup, a startup that, ironically, had been funded entirely by a trust fund my grandmother had left for both of us, but which my parents had legally manipulated into his hands alone. The email wasn't meant for Maya, the disgraced daughter. It was an automated media invitation sent to my bakery, the Velvet Crumb, because we had recently been voted the city's best rising artisanal business. They wanted us to cater the VIP lounge at the gala. A slow, deliberate warmth spread through my chest. My parents had cancelled my ticket to Switzerland to keep their unimpressive daughter hidden from their elite European friends. They had no idea that because of a sudden blizzard in the Alps, their flights had been diverted, and the entire family reunion had been relocated back to this very city and merged with the luxury gala. They thought I was sitting in my dark apartment, eating ramen and nursing my wounds. They didn't know I had just been given a keys to the kingdom. I dialed the magazine's event coordinator. My voice was calm, measured, and entirely devoid of the shaking girl who had been left at the bus stop. "Hello, this is Maya. The Velvet Crumb would be delighted to cater the event. In fact, I will personally oversee the presentation. For the next week, I slept 3 hours a night. I didn't just bake, I designed an experience. I created a signature dessert menu inspired by my journey: bitter dark chocolate paired with tart blood orange, delicate sugar cages that looked fragile but were structurally unbreakable. On the night of the gala, the grand ballroom of the Central Hotel was a sea of glittering chandeliers, silk dresses, and sharp tuxedos. I wore my chef's whites, immaculate and pressed, my hair pinned back tightly. From the kitchen doors, I watched my family arrive. My mother looked radiant in emerald velvet, her laugh tinkling like ice in a glass as she mingled with city officials. My father stood tall, his arm around Julian, who was preening under the attention of local journalists. They looked perfect. A picture-perfect family, completely unbothered by the daughter they had discarded like trash on a rainy highway. Taking a deep breath, I adjusted my apron and pushed open the heavy double doors, stepping directly into the lion's den. The air in the ballroom was thick with the scent of expensive perfume and roasted coffee. I pushed the polished silver cart containing my signature dessert display right into the center of the VIP lounge, directly adjacent to the main stage where my father and Julian were speaking with the magazine's editor-in-chief. My mother was the first to see me. She was in the middle of sipping her champagne when her eyes locked onto my chef's coat. Her glass wobbled, the delicate stems clicking against her manicured nails. The vibrant color drained from her face, replaced by a sudden, ugly mask of pure rage. She excused herself from her conversation with a brittle smile and marched over to me, her heels clicking aggressively against the marble floor. "What on earth are you doing here, Maya?" she hissed under her breath, her voice a sharp, venomous whisper. She gripped my forearm, her fingers digging through the thick fabric of my white jacket. "You are embarrassing us. Did you follow us here? We told you, you aren't part of this trip or this event. Get out before your father sees you." I didn't flinch. I gently but firmly pulled my arm from her grasp, smoothing down my apron. "I'm working, Mother. The Velvet Crumb was hired to cater this evening. If you touch me again, I'll have hotel security escort you out of my catering zone." Before she could respond, the chime of a microphone echoed through the ballroom. The editor-in-chief stepped up to the podium, announcing that the panel on family legacy was about to begin. My father and Julian took their seats on the stage under the warm, golden spotlights. My mother, white-faced and trembling with anger, had no choice but to take her front row seat, casting a final, warning glance over her shoulder at me. I stood quietly at the back of the room, watching Julian present his tech startup. He spoke eloquently about innovation, grit, and family values. But as the presentation moved to the Q&A segment, the editor-in-chief smiled warmly at my father. "We hear so much about Julian's brilliant future, but we also know your family prides itself on supporting independent entrepreneurship. Is it true your family's foundation is funding a brand new artisanal culinary grant in the city tonight?" This was the lie my father had prepared to boost his corporate image, a fictional charity initiative to look philanthropic. My father smiled broadly into the microphone. "Yes, absolutely. We believe in lifting up young creators who have the discipline to succeed, providing them with full financial backing." That was the exact moment I reached into my pocket and retrieved my phone. I connected it to the ballroom's main media screen, a privilege granted to me as the head coordinator for the evening's digital menu presentation. Instead of the dessert menu, a giant, crystal-clear screenshot of their text message filled the 20-foot LED screen behind the stage. "Have a nice taxi back home, loser. Your flight has been cancelled, and so have you." Beneath the message, I had superimposed the bank statements showing the exact date Julian had illegally transferred my portion of our grandmother's inheritance into his startup account, signed off by my father's consulting firm. A suffocating, collective gasp rippled through the audience of 500 people. The silence that followed was heavy, loud, and absolute. The silence in the ballroom was so profound that you could hear the soft, frantic hum of the ventilation system. On stage, the color completely drained from Julian's face, leaving him looking hollow and small under the unforgiving glare of the spotlights. My father froze, his microphone hovering inches from his mouth as his eyes scanned the massive text message and the damning financial ledger displayed behind him. My mother buried her face in her hands as the murmurs began, first a ripple of shocked whispers, then a roaring wave of hushed condemnation from the very peers they had spent their entire lives trying to impress. The editor-in-chief looked from the screen to my father, her expression hardening from polite professional interest to absolute disgust. I didn't yell. I didn't cause a scene. I simply walked up to the edge of the stage, looked my father dead in the eye, and gave him a polite, elegant nod. I didn't need to say a word. The truth, laid bare in black and white, had done all the heavy lifting for me. Within minutes, the event coordinators scrambled to shut down the display, but the damage was already done. Dozens of prominent guests had already taken photos of the screen. By the next morning, my father's consulting firm was hit with an internal ethics investigation regarding the manipulated trust fund, and several high-profile clients quietly severed ties with him. Julian's tech startup lost its primary investors before the week was out. Their carefully constructed house of cards had collapsed under the weight of their own cruelty. As for me, the exposure from that night didn't destroy my business, it elevated it. People didn't just see a family drama, they saw a young woman who refused to be bullied into silence. The Velvet Crumb received a massive surge in catering requests from clients who valued resilience and authenticity. With the help of a pro bono legal team who saw the story unfold that night, I filed a formal lawsuit to reclaim my grandmother's inheritance. We settled out of court, and every single penny went into expanding my bakery into a full-scale storefront. Today, my bakery smells of fresh lavender, roasted hazelnuts, and freedom. I never received an apology from my parents, and to be honest, I stopped looking for one. I realized that true closure doesn't come from the people who hurt you, it comes from the life you build after they leave. They wanted me to take a lonely taxi back to a dark apartment, but instead, that ride took me straight toward my own worth. Sitting in the quiet of my own kitchen now, watching the sun rise over a city that no longer feels cold or unwelcoming, I often think about that text message. It was meant to break my spirit, to remind me of my place in their world. But human hearts are incredibly resilient things. Sometimes, the people who are supposed to love us the most end up teaching us how to love ourselves fiercely, independently, and without apology. I chose to dismantle their cruelty not with shouting or violence, but with the quiet, undeniable weight of the truth. I stopped waiting for a seat at their table and decided to build my own. And honestly, the view from here is beautiful. Thank you for listening to my story tonight on Revenge Dismantled. It means the world to have you here in this quiet space with me. Before you leave tonight, I want to ask you a question to carry with you. Have you ever had to walk away from the people who were supposed to protect you just to find your own worth? Tell me your thoughts in the comments below. If this story touched your heart, please consider subscribing to the channel and sharing it with someone who might need to hear it tonight. Until next time, take care of yourselves, and remember, your value is something no one else can ever cancel.